welcome back. So we're cooking with gas now. So we've got the ability to add passwords, display passwords. I think it's time we finally tackled the look of these passwords. So right now it's just displaying the JSON directly. And that's just because we've got this password and we're piping it to this JSON thing, which just makes it kind of sort of print a little pretty. But we're going to do a lot better. And so really what we want to do is we want to create a card that looks nice. And so that's what we're going to work on this time. So what we're going to do is we're going to put it into a component. So we're going to make, I think it might be our first component in this class, which is not a route or a dialogue. And so that I just find that funny because the most common types of components are just ones that are on the page helping. So it's like we haven't done the most common type of component yet. That's fine. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a password display card. You can call it whatever you wanted, but password display card I think is kind of what represents what we're wanting to see here. And just to share on the real thing, so this is a password display card. So each of these things is a password display card. So that's the solution, is where we're trying to get to. So we made a password display card. I created these files for me. I'm going to go delete the spec file. I think that there's a way with the Angular CLI, by the way, to not create the spec file, but I don't really mind deleting it. It's kind of a little funny joke for me. And so I find the spec file, which is that guy right there, and I delete him. And you'll notice that if you look at the git diff, it also added it to the app module, which was handy. So it added that import there, and it brought it in right there. Sometimes I like to just go ahead and check this in. So this is create, actually I'll just type the command I typed. So ngg component password display card. Cool, so I just kind of check that in as a separate thing. Now what I want to do in here is I want to use that password display card. So how do you use the password display card? Well, what you need to do is you need to figure out what its selector is. And you can see its selectors right here. So it's called an app password display card. I used to go through and delete the word app, but I'm just going to leave it now, so it's just on there. And so what will happen now if I save it is something funny will happen. So it'll have this password stream like it's always had. It'll find that there's 3 of them, and so it'll put in 3 password display cards, but the password display cards are all going to say password display card works, right? So if I come in here, it says password display card works. Woohoo, we're done, everybody go home. Let's do a little better than that. So let's take over the HTML in here. And what we're going to do is we're going to use our basic structure of an MD card. And inside our MD card, we're going to have some of those MD card sections. So we're going to have an MD card title. And we're going to have an MD card content. And then this one's going to also have MD card actions at the end. So MD card actions. Cool. And so we've kind of got these 3 areas for our work. And each one's going to have different things in it. The title is going to have the service. So it's just going to be the password dot service. So I've said password.service, but actually if I try to run it now, it's going to crash and burn, and it's going to say service of undefined, and that's because we don't have the password inside this component yet. So that's something we need to do. And what we want to do is we want to pass it from the parent into this child. And so it works like this. You say at input with an uppercase I, password. And this password is going to be of type password. And obviously we've got some imports to do here. So it says input, don't know what you are, he comes from core. And password, I don't know what you are, he comes from password model. Great. So by saying at input, that means that other people can pass things in. Let's just go see it and then we'll talk more about it. So over in main, the HTML, so this password card, he's going to now have an input for a password. And that's all set up because that's how input works. So I'm going to receive a password. So I'm going to pass in a password. And so that's the name of the attribute that he's got. And strangely enough, the local variable inside the loop is also called password. I'm seeing how many different ways I can use the word password in this app, apparently. So now it's passed in. and it's displayed, so we should actually see it. So it says my first service, Google Fi, and 1. So things are going good. Kind of only want 2, so I kind of want to delete that one, but I'll do it later. The next thing I want to do is, so I'm going to keep filling out the content, and then we'll come back and do the CSS. So down here in the content, I want a username, and that's going to be password.username. And then I'll just stick a BR on here for now. And then I'm also going to have the password itself, which is password.password. That one's my favorite. And then for the actions, we'll put a pair of actions. We'll put a button, which is an MD button of type equal to button. Again, you probably don't have to put on the type equals button, but I grew up doing it that way, so that's how I'm doing it. Gosh darn it. And it's going to say edit, and then the other one will say delete. So these are our edit and delete buttons. And we're just trying to create, this look here eventually, right? So there's a lot to do still. And so we can save it, and we can see how close it looks to our eventual solution. And it kind of looks like something. I feel like something's happening. So making good progress. Going to keep on cruising. Next, we want to figure out where is all these gaps coming from? How is our card laid out? And I'm going to use that old trick, that style background trick. And I'm just going to put different looks on here. So I'll just make this top one red, and then the second one I'll make, what do my notes say? To make it yellow, so 255, 255, 0. And then the content, we'll stick one on him, and we'll make him green. So we'll just say 0, 255, 0. You can make them different colors. You don't have to make them what my notes say. And then this one I'll just use blue. So not very creative there, just kind of using a bunch of different colors. So now when I save it, I should get a better idea of what's causing my different gaps. And I can see that I must not have done something right on the title. Yeah, it looks like I just left off a comma right there. So there's my yellow. Come and look at it again. So yeah, so now I can kind of see, visually what all's going on. And actually, there's a lot here that's similar to what we did for the sign-in. And that's good and that's bad. So it's good because we're going to have a leg up towards figuring out how to fix it. But it's also bad because now we have to be careful about trying to keep our code dry. And dry means don't repeat yourself. So we're going to try to be good about adding some CSS and not duplicating ourselves. So I'll tell you what, let's start by copying in what sign-in did. And so we'll eventually get to where we're not duplicating ourselves, but we're going to start by copying it in. And by copying it in, we're just going to look for things that are probably going to be, present in both is what we're looking for now. So the horizontal padding, I'd say padding will probably be different. Like whenever it's a number, the amount of that number will probably be different depending on which one we're in. And so I'm just going to take it off. So right now I'm just trying to figure out what could be shared, right? The H2, that's probably going to be hard to share because one has an H2 and the other doesn't have an H2, so it's probably hard to share. This one has an actual amount of padding. This is a font color, and then this one's a button. So there's probably some things that we could share between them, and I'm just going to kind of see what happens if I share those things when it refreshes. And so now it's quite a bit tighter. It looks like some other things we might be able to do. So the MD card actions could probably use a margin of 0 as well. So we save that up. Maybe it'll kind of fix up the margins area there. So that kind of keeps that in wraps. And then this in the title, we might be able to use that white thing in both. I'm not sure because that's a property that gets carried down to the children. So white we might be able to use. So I think that what I've got here, so these rules that were copied from the other place, I think these are good in both areas. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to copy them out of here. I'm actually going to cut them out of here. So they're no longer in here for the time being. When I take them out, you can see it goes back to being ugly. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file for my shared CSS. And so what I'm going to do is at the app level, I'm going to right click and say new folder. I'm going to make a folder called shared. and I'm going to make a new file in it called common.sassy.css. And so I'm going to put that shared code in this new file. And so now I want both people to reference this other file. So I've got to go into the password display card. And I can see that right now his URL styles are just coming from there. But I want to add another one to him. So I'm going to put in, I hate when IDs mess up my typing of double quotes. So I'm going to put in another style URL. And that's going to go back one layer to shared, and then common.sassy.css. And then I'm going to see if that works. So what that should do is that should pick up those changes, which, you know, things look ugly, but those were the things that I identified that could be shared between both of them. And so there's some of those rules that can be shared. Now the other thing I want to do is I want to go into my sign-in. And so I'll just kind of bring this down here. So I'm going to go into sign in, and I want to pull out those rules that can be shared. And the whole goal is to have those rules kind of exist in only one place. And so I'm going to go into sign in. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, this is where using Git is really nice. I'm going to strip out the rules that are shared between the two. So I'm going to have my common ones over there. And then I'm going to have my sign-in ones over here. I'm going to get my screen just perfect. Control B. And I'm basically just going to go through and I'm going to take out the rules that exist over there. So padding exists over there. Background color exists over there. Margin 0, he exists over there. Color white exists over there. This one might work. It might not. I'm just going to take it out and see. Hope for the best. Card content color. I'm going to take that one out. And then margin on the card actions, I didn't actually have that one in either place. So without those rules, this card looks terrible. But what we're going to do is in his TS, he's going to also use that same extra style sheet. So I think I can get rid of my double panes now. So he's going to also use that shared style sheet. So I'm going to copy that and paste it right there. So he's going to get some of his style sheets from his sign-in component, Sassy CSS, and he's going to get others from that common area. And the whole goal is to try not to repeat yourself on things that exist in both places. So sign-in looks fine. And then if we come over to the main page, we can see that these cards are where we left them, right? And so we're kind of getting an understanding of where there are gaps and where there are not gaps. So I just wanted to bring out some of that shared things, and now I'll kind of keep going on this card's CSS. So I find the password display card, Sassy CSS, and right now it's empty, and I can start doing some more things. The other thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and take my colors off. There's a little bit of red still showing there. I guess I can kind of like observe where that's coming from. So I use my inspector just to try to figure out, where that's coming from. I can say, hey, is that on the card title? Nope. Is that on the card content? Yep, looks like it is. So that is something that exists on the card content. It looks like it's got a margin on the bottom, which is doing that to us. So if we wanted to take care of that, we could use our same structure as before. So we could say, hey, we've got a card. Our card has a title. MD card title. It's also got a MD card section, content. And it looks like our margin is there. That's kind of getting us in trouble. And so there, it got rid of the red. I might want that red back later, but I just thought I would prove that I know how to get rid of it if I want it gone. Next thing I'm going to do is I think that my colors, my crazy colors, have served their purpose. So I'm going to go through and take off my crazy colors. Appreciate your help, guys, but now I'm done with you. And so now I'll worry more about how things really look with the appropriate colors. And we should have like a blue up the top here. Cool. The next thing I want to do is I want to start adding in some other CSS rules. And the first CSS rules that I want to do are padding rules. So at the top, I'll do a 10 on the top and bottom, and then a 20 on the left and right. And then the content, basically we'll do the same thing, and we'll see kind of what that looks like. And we can see that lines up nicely. If you remember what we did before, we're going to do the same thing again. So we're going to have a horizontal padding variable, and I'm going to go ahead and put that on as 20. And the reason that I'm doing horizontal padding only and not the vertical padding is that the verting padding really could be different, so that those don't have to match. But I do definitely want the horizontals to be the same. And whenever I want them to be the same, I like to use variables. And you'll notice that this is different than what the other card used, which is why we didn't put this into the shared area. So that looks pretty good there. We've also got these card actions down here at the bottom, so I guess I ought to make an MD card actions little place, so actions. And the actions, yeah, I guess they could probably have the same padding, no real harm in that. And we can just kind of see how that looks. So that gives them a little space on the edges as well. So I like that. Next thing I want to do, let's fix the font look. I've got a few things that I chose to do up here. So I put on a font weight of normal, just because I don't ever like bold. And then a font size. And you can decide what you think looks good, but I'm going to put a font size on of 24, and so that'll affect my title. And so now they didn't really change much, but I like how they look now. So those things look good. Other things I chose to put on is I chose to put on a font size on my content of 16px. So just kind of deciding all these things. By the way, another thing you can do with font sizes is you can set like one for your parent, and then everybody else can be relative to that. Here I'm using absolute font sizes. You could go either way with it though. The next thing I want to do is I'd kind of like to have a lock icon on here. So you see how there's kind of like a lock icon, then it becomes an unlock icon. I want to figure out how to do that. So I want to have a lock icon show up there. So I'm going to do that back over in the HTML. And so that's going to be just after my service. I'm going to have a little icon button. And so I'm going to put on a button with an attribute of icon button. And it's going to have lock as its name. I'm going to close the button, see what that looks like. And so, hey, that looks really good, but that's my solution. And you can see it says the word lock, so I must have done something wrong. Oh, I shortcutted the system. The system didn't like being shortcutted, as I needed to put that into an MD icon attribute, not just a button. So now it's a icon button which has an icon in it instead of a word inside of it. So as soon as this reloads, you can see that it shows an icon. Little problems there with stretching and things like that. And there's a couple just kind of more things that I want to try to do. Some of the things I want to fix is if your eyes are really good, you'll notice how the cards are actually all different widths, and they're different widths. Like this one is smaller than that one. And so I want them all to kind of expand to take up the space that they've got. So in order to do that, I'm going to add a flex rule. So I'm going to go back up to the parent level and make sure my card flexes to do the whole thing. And I don't think I'm going to get in trouble here just letting the defaults prevail. I think that this will work. Yeah, so it looks fine with the defaults there. If I had problems with it, I would have given flex a numeric value. So I think that is starting to look better. The next thing I want to do is my header here. You can see that there's kind of like, I don't know, they're kind of like different heights. So I'm going to go try to fix those up. So if I go into my HTML over here, and I put on a layout align rule, I don't care about the first one. I just care about it being centered in the cross direction, right? So I'm going to see if that kind of straightens those two up a little bit. Cool, and so now you can see how they're aligned baseline better, and that looks better. The other thing I want is I want the lock. So see how the lock is like right next to the number one. I want to shoot it over to kind of get it out of my way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a span in here, which has an FX flex. It's funny, I'm like, every time I type FX flex and let the defaults prevail, I'm like worried now just because of that one negative experience that I had. So it looks like that should have reloaded by now. Yeah, so now it's kind of pushed that over there, and you can kind of click it, which is a cool thing. It makes kind of like ripples, but nothing else really happens. So our cards are coming along nicely. The next thing I want to do is username. I don't want it smashed right next to it. I want it to be also shot over. So same trick. So inside of here, I want to put a span with an FX flex, and maybe that'll be enough to do it. We'll see. So I'll just go ahead and stick just that in there, and I'll see if it works. And if it works, great. And if not, I'll come up with another plan. So I'll see how that goes. And that was a straight up disaster. So it looks like it not only did it not shoot it over to the other side, but it kind of like brought the other line up, and there's problems like that. I know how to fix things like this, so I want them to kind of be more separate. So I'm just going to wrap them in a parent div. Get to where I can get some more space here. And if I want the parent div to behave a little better, I'll give it flex rules too, right? So one thing I could do is I could just say FX layout, and that will make it a flex box. And so maybe that's all I really need. So I want to make sure that this guy who's a flex item is actually in somebody, a parent item that's also using flexbox. So I'm going to try this, and it looks pretty good, right? So I've got username and it's pushed over, and password and it's pushed over, and everything's working pretty good. So I'm kind of moving down on my card. I think the title looks pretty good. I think the content looks pretty good. These edit actions, I want to clean them up some. So they're kind of too far over to the left, so I want to shoot them over to the right. I want to change their colors, all kinds of things I want to do. So shooting them over to the right, I'm going to go ahead and put a flex rule on him of end, and then we may as well use center. And we can see if that shoots him over some. So now it's kind of like lined up on this edge, which is good. So I'm happy with that. They're too close to the bottom, but I'll worry about that in a little bit. The next thing I'd like to do is I'd kind of like to make them be different colors. So I'm just going to add a class on each one. So we'll just call one the edit button. I got in the habit of writing button as BTN back from my Bootstrap days. And so I just go ahead and stick with saying BTN. And this is my delete button. Now I will say that sometimes I say delete, sometimes I say remove. I'm still just totally inconsistent on which I choose to do there. So I'm going to add some rules down here. So this is my .delete button and my .edit button. And what I want to put on here is we can just start with background color rules. So for my edit button, I wanted to have a background color, RGBA, and we'll make this one, I just kind of picked a number that I thought looked good. And I'm just going to type it here, and you can type it just the same. So it's a pretty, not very opaque color for edit. And then for remove, it's actually much simpler, just red on him. So I just kind of played with it until I thought that those colors looked fine. And my red I made slightly more opaque. So I made it 0.15. And you can play with things like that to your heart's content until you get just that perfect shade of red and green. Cool, so it's going pretty good. There's not a gap at the bottom, and I'm not actually worried about the gap at the bottom because it's gonna kind of sort of get fixed as I do some other things. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to have an area of this card that gets hidden. So you can see that the white area gets hidden sometimes, and that is the content and the actions. So the content plus the actions is the area that gets hidden. Since I want to be able to refer to that area together, I'm just going to go ahead and make a div for it. And I'm going to give it a class of hidden content. Now it's not always hidden content. Sometimes it's visible content. But by making a class and putting it on here, I'll have an easy way that I kind of like capture that whole thing. And so there's my hidden content. I don't think that that would have too big of an effect, but you can see that it actually does have some effect. So by putting this in a div, we got a little margin at the bottom. You could use your inspector to figure out how we got that, but I'm not that worried about it. Cool, so things are going great. The only just like little nitpicky thing that I want to change is that technically you're allowed to have no username. So if I just delete a username on one of these guys and I come over here, you can see that you're allowed to have no username. If I have no username, I don't want to say username in blank. I just want to have nothing be there. And so for that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hide this whole thing if there's no username. And in order to do that, I'm going to put on an ng if. And so my if is going to be, if there is a password.username, then have this area. Otherwise, just hide the whole darn thing. And you can see there that kind of cleaned that up. A slight problem there with the card heights. I could do something to fix that with the heights, but I'm just going to not worry about it this minute. All right, I consider that pretty good. So we've come in here. We made our whole card flex. That's kind of what that one was doing. So flexing. Actually, this is the whole making of the component there. The sign-in component, the CSS, I stripped out some things to make them be shared. The sign-in component, I said to use that shared CSS. The password display card is all new, so we did all of this time, so a pretty long video, I guess. And then all the CSS that goes along with that card. The TypeScript that goes along with it was pretty small. It was really just to receive a password, and then that common CSS. So this is my password display card. And we've got all the HTML going on to where we can do some nice looking things. All right, come back next time and we'll work on some functionality. See you then. Bye.